Hello, everybody. I'm Zenith Rule, and welcome back to Diving Into DuckTales, where Kat Macberrie, Doug Macberrie, and I dive into the wide-eyed wilds of the new DuckTales reboot. So, before we begin, as always, how's it going, Kat?
What? You gotta speak up. I can't find my way out of this pantry. Is this the door?
Every single time, I swear, I let you in the kitchen one time, and you just find your way into the pantry. I don't know how.
It's too big.
Oh well, she's trying to find her way out of the pantry. How's it going, Doug?
I'm kind of having problems of my own right now. There's this giant bubble with a bowler derby trying to chase me.
Well, just a piece of advice: don't touch the bubble. You don't know where it's been. Also, watch out for the piranhas and the sharks. I'm pretty sure this is where Glomgold gets his sharks.
Okay. Okay, I found my way out.
I've distracted the bubble for now.
Why don't you give us a brief summary of this new DuckTales episode that is full of crazy antics?
Oh boy, there is so much in this, but I guess I'll condense it down to the basic plot. Basically, Mrs. Beakley gets ambushed by a mysterious cloaked figure in the mansion. I'm not sure how that person got in, considering, she's supposed to be the bodyguard and we got Duckworth back, but whatever. She comes in, she fights Mrs. Beakley and kidnaps her. And then Scrooge realizes this and decides to go after her, realizing that the clue the person left behind alludes back to his old spy days. And Webby, of course, being a huge fan of Scrooge, as well as her granny spy days, definitely wants to tag along. So it's a Webby and Scrooge adventure to go rescue Mrs. Beakley from an unknown foe. And like I said, that is the condensed version. There is so much stuff that goes on in this, and there are so many references. Like, I have at least, 10 different, tabs open right now just to reference everything. Like, dear God.
I think the first thing to note is that, first of all, we knew Mrs. Beakley was a spy, but now we got confirmation that Scrooge is indeed a spy, or was at some point, at around the same time that he was a billionaire. We see him in his younger days, and it makes so much sense. I can't believe I didn't think of that before.
Well, I mean, Scrooge has been a lot of things, let's be honest.
I mean, we knew he was an adventurer. We knew quite a bit of the stuff about him from his past, but I just never thought, he has a spy on his staff. That might be where he met Mrs. Beakley. And I don't know, I didn't really connect the dots to that point. I just think it's interesting him having a spy as a assistant, or, well, not your assistant, but just, assisting him in the manner when they went on spy adventures together in the past. It's very interesting, and it really does fit with Scrooge's character.
Oh, yeah. Honestly, the whole spy thing adds, a brand new dimension, not just to Scrooge, but to Beakley as well. Because in the original show, Mrs. Beakley was just your typical housekeeper. She did go above and beyond to protect the boys and help out Scrooge whenever he needed it. But in this case, you see just how freaking badass Mrs. Beakley is. She was the top spy in her day. You see the flashback of her as a she was part of an organization called Shush, parody of Shield. And she followed everything to the letter. She was the perfect spy. Which is funny because when you see Scrooge as a spy, he is the complete opposite. And it's really funny considering, now he's this hardcore adventurer who's watch my lead, do as I say, be careful, yada yada. It's fun to see him in his younger days, how he was a lot more carefree and didn't really consider the consequences that much. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, he very much reminds me of a young James Bond. In fact, a lot of this episode really reminds me of James Bond. There's a really nice aesthetic to the spy atmosphere that gives DuckTales something that it didn't really have before. Like, again, everything we've gotten so far pretty much has been fantastic, but this brings a very new dynamic, a very new tone and atmosphere to everything that we've been seeing up until this point. And just watching Scrooge and Mrs. Beakley together is so interesting, especially because we get to see how they looked when they were younger. And Mrs. Beakley, I was not expecting her to be that fit.
Well, she was a spy. That's kind of part of the job. You know, you do have to, like, even though it's mostly espionage, you do have to be in a certain degree of shape, not to mention, you know, be able to fight your way out of a deadly situation. And then plus, she did train Webby, so you know that she has some mad fighting skills.
But yeah, like it's really interesting seeing how they operated back then. What do you think, Mr. Doug?
Oh yeah, I agree. It is very interesting, especially the fact that you see like the whole time the episode's going on, they're simultaneously like having flashback going on from when they when Beakley and Scrooge met, and it's like they say it's many years ago, but you can tell it's the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like everything is so 60s. But yeah, it's definitely interesting, seeing how they met, especially, not only that they met, but who arranged for their meeting. It was Professor Ludwig von Drake.
I was wondering when we'd see him. Because when I was looking up who the characters we were going to see in the future, one of them was definitely Ludwig von Drake. And not only that, but it's the original voice actor for him, too. Corey Burton. Like, I was really surprised. Like, because he's the only other person aside from Donald to reprise his role from the original DuckTales. And he still sounds the same. It's so great. And of course, he's his typical, like, science-y self, all smart and everything. And I like how in this version, like, he's basically Q for Shush with all his gadgets and everything. I think that's cool.
I really actually, well, I don't research the episodes as much as you do because I like to be surprised to see what's going forward. And I was just kind of like, I was surprised and very pleasantly surprised when they brought in Ludwig. I'm like, wait a second, Ludwig's here? Oh my god. And the references just keep coming. But this is a great role for him because it's something that they don't have to constantly reuse, simply because it's a character from the past. And so if they have problems getting the voice actor, they have an out, they have a way around it. So I think this is a great use for the character. And if they ever bring him back in present day or something like that, they can always bring him in for maybe an episode or two. But
I'm wondering how they do that, because in that flashback, he was older than Scrooge was. And I know, like, the characters in the show have a tendency to not age for some reason, but it'd be really interesting to see if they brought him back. Like, how old would he be? Or would it be sort of like with Scrooge, how he went through some, like, scientific process or dimension that caused him to, like, halt his aging? That's the only way I can see it, like, working out, unless he comes back in more flashbacks.
either way, it was just great seeing him in the episode. I thought he was very funny. I liked his dynamic with Mrs. Beakley, since Mrs. Beakley was basically doing his job for him, except for the gadgets. Like, she was debriefing herself, which I thought that was really funny. So we have this spy dynamic, and the whole time that they're going out on the spy adventure, Huey, Dewey, and Louie and Donald are just at home watching Ottoman Empire, and, well, Donald is still stuck in the pantry the entire time. Like, he still hasn't figured out how to get out of the pantry, and I'm like, God damn it, Donald. Oh, God.
I kind of feel bad for Donald's voice actor because it's like sometimes it seems like he shows up for only like 5 seconds of an episode just to let out an angry quack.
The thing about Donald's voice actor is that he is also works as an animator, so it's like, he's got more than one thing to do, so maybe they caught him on a busy day and that was all he was able to do.
It's still funny though.
Yeah.
He shows up in the booth for like 5 minutes just to do a signature quack and then he leaves. It's like, there's your paycheck.
So here's an idea. We're not going to be able to afford you for the entire 30 minutes, but we want to have Donald stuck in a pantry. That's your motivation. Go. But again, it's so believable for Donald to get in all these situations. And while I do wish we saw a little bit more of Donald, the jokes at his expense for the last few episodes have been really, really good. So I'm not complaining. It's been a lot of fun seeing him just in random scenarios. Like, while they're out having adventures, Donald's here like just, I'm gonna try to make breakfast. This did not end well. While this is happening, Mrs. Beakley has been kidnapped by another super duper spy from a different organization. I believe it's called f.o.w.l.
Yes, f.o.w.l. And honestly, like, that kind of got me excited. Like, they kind of allude to f.o.w.l back in the pilot. It was on that board that Webby had about, all her little, like, tidbits and stuff. But f.o.w.l is actually, like, a big deal in both DuckTales as well as Darkwing Duck, because it's basically their version of Hydra. Like, that's where all, like, the big name baddies come from. Like, actually, a majority of Darkwing's villain entourage is actually associated with f.o.w.l. So, the fact that they actually had a f.o.w.l villain in this was actually pretty cool. And I'm glad that they referenced that.
I'm interested to see what they're going to do with f.o.w.l, because we don't really get too much of an explanation this episode. Granted, it was mostly focused on the villain herself, and, seeing what she's all about, maybe foreshadowing more to come, because, like you said, it's a big organization with a bunch of different villains. So I'm kind of interested to see where they're going to go with that, if maybe the next time we hear from f.o.w.l is when this villain is going to return, or something like that. But, so we have this villain from f.o.w.l kidnapping Mrs. Beakley, so Scrooge has to go and save her, because he's following the clues, he knows pretty much where she's going, and Webby wants to come with him, because she's been trained for all these different spy adventures. Scrooge does not want to bring her along, but Webby ends up stowing away in the submarine, while Launchpad drives it while blindfolded, because it's top secret.
I love how he only crashes when he takes his blindfold off or it slips. Like, he can actually, like, drive perfectly well when he's blindfolded.
Whoops, my blindfold slipped. It starts to crash.
Typical Launchpad.
Coming in blind. I love it so much. But yeah, Webby stows aboard the submarine. Scrooge reluctantly lets her come along. And throughout the episode, they form this really cool bond, because these are two characters who haven't really interacted throughout the entire show so far. For the most part, we see Scrooge with the boys, and while he doesn't really want to bring them on all the adventures, he recognizes that they're also young adventurers like himself, and he's keeping an eye on them. With Webby, it's not really his kid, it's Mrs. Beakley's responsibility, so he doesn't want to encroach upon that. But now he sees how capable Webby is, and throughout their entire adventure going to the secret spy island, as they James Bonded up with all these different traps and in different scenarios, they also flash back to the mission that he and Mrs. Beakley was on when they last encountered the villain from f.o.w.l. And this is a really good setup, because while it is an A plot and a B plot, they connect so incredibly well, because they're pretty much part of the same plot. The stuff in the past with Scrooge and Mrs. Beakley directly relate to the things that are going on in the present, and this is a really great setup for the episode.
Oh yeah, I love the setup of this. And can I just say, I am so happy that one of my wishes came true. Because I was saying back in the golfing episode that I suddenly realized that there was no moments or episodes or any plot centered around Scrooge and Webby, and that I had hoped that that would happen since, that's what happened in the original. And not only did we get that, but we got like a great spy episode out of it. Not to mention, we got the backstory with her grandmother and how their two storylines interconnect and everything. Like, this was brilliant. Like, this was everything I could have hoped for and more for a Webby Scrooge episode. And I really like their interaction and, the bond that they form, because she knows, like, so much about Scrooge to the point where it's kind of creepy. Like, and even though she's been living in his mansion for, I assume, most of her life, like, he knows nothing about her, and then he takes, like, a genuine interest in her. Like, that is, like, so heartwarming. Like, just seeing their relationship develop the way it did was just so great, and I loved it.
Yeah, I have to agree with that because there's a moment in the episode where Scrooge realizes that he doesn't know that much about Webby at all, while she knows all of this about him. And in some other shows, they could have treated this as a joke, or they could have kept him keeping his distance. But here, he actually makes an effort to learn more about her, and it comes back in the end of the episode. Like, there's a really genuine bond that they form in this episode that I really enjoyed. I thought it was very genuine, very heartfelt, and I think it's just great to see characters that we don't normally see interact. Mr. Doug, what are your thoughts on this dynamic?
So first off, yeah, I really like how, as I was saying, they kind of synchronize the two stories and, make them kind of happen at once, to the point where, like, they actually have a film of the past event happening. They're watching it in the present. So I thought that was really clever. And yeah, I really, really liked the Scrooge and Webby dynamic. I had been, waiting for an episode like this, especially because it's like in the old DuckTales, despite the fact that we don't really like Webby as much there, it's like Scrooge really had an affinity for her. So it's like you kind of want to see that in this. And yeah, it is so much better in this case. So yes, I truly agree.
Yeah, when he asked her at the end to call him Uncle Scrooge, I squeed. I'm like, yay, there it is!
I'm Webby.
They just have this chemistry with each other that I think really, really works, especially from the moment where they start going to the secret island and they start storming the beach and they see this giant bubble. And the first thought that came into my mind was like, oh my god, she has the dirty bubble under her employ. Everyone is doomed.
You child. Learn your shit. Like, come on. That is from, like, a classic TV show. That is the Rover from The Prisoner. It is an iconic, like, thing in the British spy, like, genre. Like, you've seen it parodied, like, everywhere. Even Simpsons parodied it. Like, granted,
Simpsons did
it. But yeah, I think the dirty bubble was kind of based on it, but honestly, the thing was a bit more terrifying than that. It actually could kill people. But I love that they threw that reference in there, and on top of that, just to showcase that, this is all based on the British spy genre, they gave it a bowler hat.
See, I actually never knew that was a reference to something else. I was just like, a giant bubble, okay. Maybe it's friendly.
Yeah, like,
It's not a mushroom.
Yeah, for anyone who doesn't know, The Prisoner, was one of those signature, like, spy films from the 60s. Well, I should say series. And it was, like, about a guy who was a former agent, and he was kidnapped by this evil agency and kept on the island with other people. And every time he tried to escape, the bubble would, like, chase after him and either incapacitate him or try to kill him. So, yeah, this is a dangerous bubble.
So what we're gonna have to do, SpongeBob, is pop that bubble.
And I just think back to that joke in Simpsons where they show it coming after Homer when he tries to escape this island, and he just pops it with a plastic spork. And the people watching it are like, "Why did you think a bubble would stop him?" And she's like, "Shut up! That's why."
I really like what they do in this episode, though, because they do this flashback where they showcase Scrooge and Mrs. Beakley dealing with the bubble and how they deal with it in the present pretty much the same exact way. And Webby copies Mrs. Beakley's moves pretty much verbatim. And you can see that she's been training probably even more than Mrs. Beakley has, to the point where she's I don't want to say she's on par because she's still very young, but she can do pretty much anything Mrs. Beakley can, and she saves the day the same way Mrs. Beakley did by stopping the bubble with gas. And I'm like, oh, well, that does kind of make sense. That's interesting.
Well, she did study all of their case files. She knows what happens for the most part, and again, she knows everything there is about Scrooge. So she knows how he got out of certain situations.
Yeah, so they keep progressing through the island, through the traps, and it keeps using this format. So they keep progressing through the island, and they keep running into these traps, and so it keeps utilizing this format of, all right, we're going to see how they dealt with it in the past, and then we're going to see how they dealt with it in the present. And again, this dynamic works so well because you don't exactly know how things are going to go, because things sometimes are exactly the same, sometimes are a little bit different. Like in the past, they had to contend with robots a little bit differently, but now Webby in the present does things a little bit differently. To the point where it seems like she's coming up with new ideas as well as using Mrs. Beakley's old moves, and I really enjoyed that.
Oh, I should mention a nice little tidbit. Mrs. Beakley's voice actress, she actually played a spy on another TV show, on Castle. She was on there only for the last, I think, season or two. But yeah, her character is a spy, and she does team up with the lead character, Richard Castle, he's a writer turned freelance cop / detective, and they kind of have the same dynamic that Scrooge and Beakley have in this episode, in that he's outside his jurisdiction. He's all gung-ho, and he gets himself in trouble, and then she's the one that has to bail him out. So I thought it was a nice subtle little reference right there.
So things kind of come to a head when they actually reach the lair of the evil villain. Very much like James Bond, they get past the evil piranhas and the robots and the death traps, and they finally get to the lair, and it turns out to be a trap, because the villain was waiting for them, because the villain pretty much needs them to make this secret formula. She stole a page from, what was it? It was some sort of book. Did they say the Great Book? Or
Yeah, it was the Great Book, and it was found in the Castle Dunwyn. And if that sounds familiar to anyone who watched the Disney Afternoon, it should, because that was the castle that was protected by a mystical race of creatures called the Gummy Bears!
So from the moment you get that reference, even if you don't, things start getting a little bit funny, a little bit silly, a little bit fun. I love this episode so damn much. So we see in the past that she's using the good book to make this potion, and she makes this potion. We don't know what it does though until we get to the flashback, and she says it is a potion that allows her to create a race of super bouncing henchmen. You heard that right. She's trying to create an evil race of gummy bears. And they don't even say the name gummy bears, which is the funny part. She's just like, wait, bouncing? Seriously, just bouncing? What? It'll be great. They'll be bouncing here and there and everywhere. They'll be beyond compare. I was losing my shit when I first heard that. I'm like, oh, I was like tweeting at Kat at the time, and I was just like, wait a second. They're referencing the gummy bears.
Mm-hmm. Like, oh my god. When I first saw the clip of that online, I'm like, oh my god, they did it. They incorporated gummy bears into DuckTales. Because I was wondering, because I had heard rumors that they were going to try to reference, like, all of the Disney afternoon shows in DuckTales at some point. And I was thinking to myself, how the hell are they going to get gummy bears in there? Because gummy bears takes place during medieval times, and they live in a world full of, like, purely fantasy, like, mystical elements. So the fact that they reference them as these mystical beings from long ago, and that they pass down their knowledge of how to make the gummy bear juice into, like, this all-powerful, like, serum, that's just brilliant right there. And they do it all without making the obvious references, because let's face it, saying the words gummy bears and gummy bear juice is just plain silly.
Yeah, like I was laughing like crazy, and if you look at the page from the book, like at first I thought it was referencing Care Bears for some reason. I'm not entirely sure why, but if you look back at the book page, it's clearly the gummy bears in outlines. And the entire time I was just thinking to myself, gummy bears bouncing here and there and everywhere. High adventure that's beyond compare. Doug, what do you think of the gummy bears?
Yeah, I don't really have any experience with the gummy bears or much of the Disney afternoon. Like, if you were to talk to me about one Saturday morning, that I could tell you about, but yeah, not, really knowledgeable much past that.
To be fair, I'm not really that knowledgeable about gummy bears either. I did remember watching it back in the day, but the thing was, this is like the first Disney afternoon show. It came in back in 1985, so a little bit before I was born. But it also ended before then as well. And plus, with the lineup, it was usually first in the lineup, and for some reason I was never home in time to watch it by then. But yeah, I do remember it distinctly, though. I remember the bears, I remember the juice, I remember a few elements here and there, just, I even rewatched the pilot for this just to refresh my memory a bit. But for the most part, it's not, one I look too fondly back on or remember much, but I remember it. I mean, come on, it's the gummy bears. How can you forget the gummy bears?
I never actually watched the gummy bears growing up, but they were referenced everywhere. I mean, from Rugrats with the dummy bears to just references here and there and everywhere. It was just a show that you at least knew the theme song of, you knew of it. And while I don't remember watching it, I do remember watching the Disney afternoon block, and so I pretty much knew what it was all about. So the reference here was just really, really funny, and I love Scrooge's reaction. It's like, seriously, I was threatened by you. This is your villain?
Yeah, her plan was dumb. I'm sorry, her plan is dumb. Putting aside the fact that, she thinks that bouncing is gonna lead to world domination, anybody who knows about how the gummy bear juice works knows that it is a temporary thing. They even, in the show, it only lasts for 5 minutes at the most, and even then, you can only take the formula once a day, otherwise you get really bad side effects. Not to mention the fact that gummy bear juice is really hard to make. They do reveal, the basic formula with, which colored berries to add. However, they left out how you're supposed to stir it, how you're supposed to, heat the cauldron and everything. There's a lot of variables to that than what we just saw. So, and I mean, granted, they do say that Black Heron was a chemist, so I wouldn't put it past her to actually know those steps and do them correctly, but still, making something like that on a huge scale for however big her army is, yeah, it's not practical. And as I said, the effects are temporary. Although I was surprised that the effects for the ducks work the same as it did on the bears, because that wasn't the case in this show. Because for whatever reason, when humans or ogres would consume it, they would just get the super strength. They wouldn't get like necessarily the bouncing ability, or if they did, it was like a diminished version of it. So overall, I'm just saying Black Heron's plan was dumb.
I do agree that it was dumb, but I was just laughing the entire time, and I love when they cut to the present, and she's like, "Oh, I'm going to consume the juice now because you're escaping and all this," and so Webby consumes it too, and there's a giant bounce fight. Wait, let me rewind for a second. There is a giant bounce fight that is more epic than that sounds on paper. I know. But yeah, it's a really cool part of the episode where you have Webby taking on the villain for the most part. Webby is the one who's really taking Black Heron on, and I was just like, whoa, go Webby.
I do like too that Scrooge trusted enough in her abilities where he let her go after the villain while he rescued Mrs. Beakley. It's like, wow, that's awesome. Because you never see that usually in that scenario.
And I do like how he basically cued her to drink the juice by saying, oh, yes, she wants to drink her favorite tea when, he learned earlier that her favorite drink was juice. And it's just another reason of he got to know Webby a lot more here, and they had a kind of a secret exchange, and that allowed her to drink the juice and get the upper hand on Black Heron, have this really cool bounce fight in a castle, bouncy castle fight. But it's cooler than it sounds. Seriously, this was a lot of fun. And meanwhile, Scrooge rescues Mrs. Beakley, and they save Webby after the potion basically wears off, and they're about to fall to their deaths, and Scrooge saves her with his secret spy umbrella, and
a Mary Poppins, y'all.
Mary Poppins. And then we have Black Heron appears to disappear. Her mechanical hand is left clutching to the side of the tower, but she's nowhere to be found. But if I know one thing in cartoons and in movies, if you don't see a body, they're still alive. She's out there.
Not to mention, we also see Webby grab a vial of the juice. So now Black Heron has even more reason to track them down again.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I should mention a cool, nice little tidbit. When they first show Black Heron's mugshot back at the Shush headquarters, her serial number is 09141985. So basically, September 4th, 1985, the air date of the Gummy Bears.
Oh God, I wouldn't have gotten that reference, but wow. And we also get a little bit of background on how they defeated her the first time, and Scrooge is like, I didn't. And it turns out that Mrs. Beakley was the one who drank the juice the last time and broke protocol to save Scrooge and blow up the complex, seemingly destroying Black Raven. But we know that wasn't true because she came back with a mechanical arm, so she's dark and mysterious.
Not really. She looks basically the same, which again leads me to question, does anybody age in this show?
I suppose the first thing that we should talk about is the villain. Unfortunately, aside from her design, which I thought was pretty cool, I didn't really think she had much going for her. She had the funny villain plan. I like that. She very much reminded me of Dr. Draken when she was revealing her plan, and I was laughing. But she didn't really have enough menace to her, and we didn't learn anything about her besides that she works for f.o.w.l. So...
yeah, I didn't care for her too much either. She just seemed like your basic villain of the week, which you would, see in spy films from time to time. They would just be there with an odd gimmick and a weird plan for world domination. I did find it interesting that her design looked a lot like Agent 99 from Get Smart, which is weird because Agent 99 was a good guy. And another interesting thing that you'll like, Zen, her voice actress is April Winchell, who also voiced Cruella de Vil in the 101 Dalmatians TV show we just watched a couple weeks back.
Oh my god! So now
she was also Miss Finster in Recess.
Now I'm imagining Black Heron taking the gummy juice and being like, "Gummy bear juice bounces for everyone. You get a bounce, and you get a bounce, and you get a stapler. Office supplies for everyone."
Gummy bear juice for everyone. One other tidbit I wanted to add real quick. So sort of referencing both characters. So again, I mentioned that Corey Burton came back to reprise Ludwig von Drake in this, but he also serves as an Easter egg for the Gummy Bears as well, because he was the original voice for Gruffy Gummy.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
So that's like a double whammy right there. Like, I just think that's so cool, and I don't know if that was intentional or not, but I think that's awesome.
God damn it. I really love all the little nods to continuity that they have in this episode. In general, like, this was a fantastic episode. Aside from maybe the villain being the weak point, like, we got some really, really fun stuff. I was dying at the gummy bear bit. I thought it was really climactic at the end. I thought the dynamic between Scrooge and Webby was great. I thought that really the flashback setup was different. They're really showing in these episodes as they continue forward that they're not afraid to experiment with different things. Like, we had the anthology episode. They have all these different things that they're trying, and they really work, and they don't seem like they're really detracting from the series flow, because every single episode feels like a DuckTales episode. And when you change formats this often, sometimes you can change the tone or feel of a series, but they keep the distinct DuckTales feel while experimenting with different formats, and they've all really worked, especially since the start of this year. So I really have to give kudos to this episode for going there, for going with the spy aesthetic, for having the Huey, Dewey, and Louie watch Ottoman Empire, a nice callback to a previous episode, and having Donald stuck in the pantry. The jokes were on point this episode, and while I didn't utilize every character very much, it was very much a Webby Scrooge-centric episode. The stuff that they used of the other characters worked really well, that fit with their characters. I think this is one of my favorite episodes, honestly. It's up there. It was a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to see where they go with this, because I wasn't expecting a follow-up with the spy dynamic that we found out very early on in the show. There's so many different plot threads that have branched out into new things, where we could have a spy episode now, we could have an adventuring episode now, we could have a Gizmo Duck episode, a Della Duck episode, we could have a Magica episode. You never know what you're gonna get. It's here and there and everywhere, bouncing around with different plot threads, and I love it.
Speaking of Gizmo Duck, guess what we're getting next episode?
Ooh, well, I liked Gizmo Duck in the last episode, so I'm interested to see what happens next. Doug, what are your thoughts?
So first off, you didn't really let me talk too much about Black Heron. I liked her. I thought she was good. I love the fact that she uses her beak as a sword to counter Scrooge with his cane. So I thought she was pretty menacing. I mean, sure, her plan is stupid, but it's like, hey, she's actually kind of a threat, and she's pretty quick on her feet. I mean, hell, she grabs the page while they're at the auction and just runs out the window. So I'm like, hey, don't count her out as kind of a lame villain, because I think she's actually pretty cool. I think she's fun. She'll probably come back. So yeah, I mean, I would love to see her come back. I loved her design and everything like that. I also noticed, like I said, we saw so many references in this, not only to like gummy bears, but also like past episodes. Like when you first see Scrooge at Shush headquarters, he says that he's just come from defeating Jack the Tripper, which is apparently it was like this from the original DuckTales. It was like this Jekyll and Hyde type episode where Scrooge would get like crazy and give away all his money if like he turned into sort of the Mr. Hyde thing. So yeah, there was that. I also noticed when they're in the cave where the robots are, there's some binary code etched into the walls. So I'm like, I need to research what that was spelling. But yeah, and I think like the robots there kind of looked a little like Armstrong, also from the original DuckTales. So yeah, there's just like you turn your head for a second and you're gonna miss a reference because it's like they're just all over the place.
I know, like even I forgot those little bits. 'Cause, like they're so quick and their design is like slightly changed, but it's there enough that you can recognize it. It's just God, there was so much stuff in this. Like this is what the episode Jaws should have been. Like they had all the collaboration of the main characters and all these other like characters coming in at once, but it was just a big mishmash of like stuff. In this case, you have like focus on two main characters going through this entourage and barrage of all these references and old characters and new characters, and it's great. I love it.
This is like spy action at its best. It both is a good parody of spy things in a lot of ways, kind of like the Kim Possible episode where they had Senor Senior Senior becoming a villain, and he suddenly got evil Tops of Doom and stuff like that. But like it felt a little bit like that, but it also felt very James Bond. It felt very like it was a mix of serious and comedy and parody that worked really, really well. I was just really happy with this episode. When I saw it, I'm like, there's so much to love about it. I did not know where to begin, and to be honest, I really hope we have a follow-up to this. I want to see more about the spy stuff. I want to know more about Scrooge's past. We learn a little bit here and there every like single every single episode we learn a little bit more, and the more we learn about his past, especially because now we know he's pretty much immortal, like I'm just like, what other adventures did he go on? Scrooge is a huge plot device now because he could pretty much be anywhere in his past, present, or future, and it would fit within the scenario that this show creates.
Yeah, I'm actually really interested to see if they're going to incorporate f.o.w.l into the plot line because, as I said, f.o.w.l was a big deal, especially in Darkwing Duck. And since we got a taste of Darkwing Duck, like, granted, it's as a TV show, I mean, there's a chance that, again, Darkwing's adventures could have been based on his real life adventures, which means that f.o.w.l could theoretically exist in their world. Like, they could have his villains. They could bring his villains back for Scrooge to fight. Like, there are so many possibilities. Like, I am really genuinely excited, and I kind of hope they go in that direction a bit. I mean, it's no big deal if they don't, but I just think the possibilities they have me excited. Like, I really hope they do it.
All right, Mr. Doug, do you have anything further to add to this?
I don't really know what else to add. Like I said, there's so many references in this episode, but even like ignoring the references, this is just a great episode on its own. And, it's a great character piece. We finally get, that much needed development of Webby and Scrooge. And at the same time, you also see Scrooge and Beakley. You learn Beakley's first name is like, what, Bettina or something like that?
Yeah, Bettina Beakley.
Yeah, so it's like, you get a lot out of this episode. It may not necessarily be toward like the Magica arc, but yeah, definitely, it builds the world a whole lot more. It's, also suggesting that it's, going to reference stuff not just, exclusive to DuckTales, but, also like anywhere in Disney. So, I mean, it opens so many doors. So yeah, I'm really excited to see where it goes. And I'm like, if anybody, if we missed any reference, feel free to leave, what you noticed in the comments, because I'd love to, see what we missed.
Yes, we like being educated.
Yeah, like I don't know what more I can say either. This is just one of my favorite episodes of the show. Go watch it. It is a lot of fun. Watch out for the dirty bubble though. He is lurking on that island.
It's the rover. God, learn your shit.
I'm sorry, I'm too busy watching SpongeBob.
I swear to God, all of England is gonna declare war on you, Zen.
They already have. I mean, dear God. So anyway, with all of that being said, we all love this episode. I give this 2 thumbs up. Next time, we're going to be talking about a Gizmo Duck episode, so look forward to that. Anyway, I am Zenith Rule.
I'm Kat Macberrie.
I'm running out the window with the map.
No!
I'm Doug McBarry.
And we will see you guys next time.
Here and there and everywhere.
And just remember, if you see somebody bouncing around in a fight, they might just be ducks or gummy bears. You never know.
Nah, I'm pretty sure you can tell the difference between ducks and bears. Come on. Don't be silly, Zen.
Hey, this is Megami33. Thank you for watching Zenith Will Review. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more awesome videos. If you like what you see, check out the Patreon page at patreon.com/ZenithWillReview.